Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of sound design for video games. In the last episode, we went and created the sounds for a checkpoint system. In this episode, we're going to be going over the implementation of those sounds inside of Unreal Engine, getting them in and getting them working correctly. Let's get started. Let me start by showing you what we're going to end up with. So by the end of this video, you're going to have a functioning checkpoint. So when your character or your car goes through that checkpoint and triggers it, it's going to make a sound like that. I'll do it again. The next thing you need to do is import your audio. Now from the previous episode, I've already got my 3 files exported out of my DAW. You should go and do that now if you haven't already. To import, in case you are very new to Unreal Engine, it's very easy. You can simply go and find files and drag and drop them in. You can also right click anywhere in this content drawer, go up to import, and then simply go find the files and press import. Now I do suggest that you go and do your own sound design and bring those sounds into Unreal Engine, but for those of you that just want to grab some sound files and get on with the lesson, you can get some for free here at my website. It's sotasound.co.uk. Go to the products area and you can see there's a light version here, Racing Game Sound Design Light. You can get that completely for free. And there's a version here for £10, Racing Game Sound Design Full. The light version is enough to get you through the entire series. It's got enough sounds that you will always have something to play with for each episode. The full version is every single sound that is in the Racing Game project. So if you want to support the channel, that's a good way of doing it. You get something back in return. Okay, now let's get into actually creating the Metasound. Now, if you haven't done this already, I do suggest you go and watch the previous episode, but go and right click here, press audio, go to Metasound source and call this ms_checkpoints. I've already got mine created, so I'm just going to delete this. But like I said, if you haven't done this already, I would suggest going back and watching the previous episode. This is my finished Metasound, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it piece by piece and essentially show you how it all works. And if you are very new to Metasounds, I'm going to be telling you how each piece links together and how they interact with each other. So don't worry if yours is completely empty and you're thinking, how the hell am I going to do all of this? Don't worry about it. We're going to talk about it quite thoroughly here. Now, the first thing that you will probably have is an out mono. Now, I've got an out left and an out right. In the previous episode, I did show how to do this, but if you've only got an out mono, you simply have to go to the Metasound settings here, go to the output formats and change that from mono to stereo, and you will have an out left and an out right. Now that I've went over that and got that sorted out, let's sort out the begin sound, stop sound logic. So you need an on play. You can usually grab that from up here like this. That on play is coming out into a trigger delay. You can drag that, type in trigger, look for trigger delay. Your trigger delay is going to need a delay time, and that delay time will depend on how long your audio files are. So for the time being, you can put that at something like 10 seconds or 20 seconds, anything that just gives you enough time to make sure that it plays through the entire sound. I'm going to stick mine back to 2 because I know that that's right for my checkpoint sound. Out of that, it's going to be attached to the output on finished. Once again, you can grab that from here. It should already be there. Yeah, you can only have one output on finished. So that's already there. Hook that up like that. And then when you press play, it's going to fire off here into the trigger delay, fire off onto unfinished, and then it will stop the Metasound. Now, we're going to get into the actual audio section now. This is the first time that in this series you will be working with wave players, so I'll go over that right now. So if I go and create a wave player, you can create many different versions depending on what the sound file is, because what a wave player does is it basically plays a sound file. So you've got a 5.1, a 7.1, a mono, a quad, or a stereo. So you just pick the one that is appropriate for you. For me, my one is a stereo, so I'm going to pick a stereo. And basically this is what it is. It has an on play trigger. So basically you need to trigger this wave player or it will never play. You can also stop it with a trigger. So you can make that wave player stop playing. You can tell if it needs to loop. You can change the start time. You can change the pitch shift so that you can make that wave player be higher in pitch or lower in pitch. Ultimately, what that does is it basically compresses the audio, making it play quicker. When I say compress, I should be specific. I mean it makes the audio shorter, which means it's playing quicker. Therefore, the pitch goes up. If you pitch shift it down, it will make the audio lower in pitch. You can change the loop start and the loop duration. If it's set to -1, that just means that it's going to loop forever. And then there's various outputs here, which we will go through over the course of the series. Now you can see here we have 3 wave players, and these 3 wave players, if you go to the wave asset area, you can click the little drop down menu and you can actually search for the file. So if I type in SW for sound wave, go underscore, and we'll say checkpoints. And you can see we have checkpoint impact, jingle, and pad. Now this is the jingle, this has loaded in pad, and this one has loaded in the percussive elements. Out of this, we're going into stereo delays. So you simply drag out here and you can type in stereo delay and it will create one of these. You need to plug the output left and output right into the stereo delay for each of these wave players. Now there's a few reasons why you may use a stereo delay. The first reason is that you may want to add some delay to an element. So for instance, this jingle element here, you can see I've added a bit of delay there. But the other thing that you may want to do in sound design, it's actually quite common to very slightly stagger your audio elements. So if you've got a multi-layered piece of audio, sometimes staggering those elements very slightly can help add clarity to the overall effect. So if you look to this little delay area here, delay time, you can see on this one, we're actually not using any delay on this wave player here because the wet level is 0. So we're not hearing any of that delay effect. We're only hearing the dry level, which is set to 1. On this one, the wet level is set to 1 and the dry level is set to 0. So we're hearing nothing but the delayed signal out of this delay and this delay. So you can see dry level 0, dry level 0. And then in the delay time, we have a graph input. Now graph input's very easy. You just drag off. You do promote to graph inputs and it creates it. And then you can press F2 on this. And if you go over here, you can see you can name this whatever you want and it will appear here. Naming is very important for graph inputs. You have to make sure that they're always named with something that you're going to remember because you will be referring to them in different blueprints. Now these graph inputs, they're not that important. They're just so that I can easily control it with a dial. As long as you get the numbers in correctly at this point, that's fine. Now, if you follow the pink lines coming out of each of these stereo delays, you'll see they converge to a stereo mixer 3. Now, out of the gain values, these little float inputs here, we are plugging in the decibels to linear gain node, which essentially allows us to convert a value into linear gain. So we can essentially treat what we're putting into here, this number, as a decibel value, and this will do the work to turn that back into a linear gain value, which is what the mixer wants to receive. So once you've got these decibels to linear gain nodes, what we're then creating are graph inputs. Now this little area here is a master volume area. So out of the out left and right of the stereo mixer 3, we're going into a stereo mixer 2 and plug a graph input in here. And I've set that to 0.5 so that it's not too loud, essentially. Then take the output left and output right and plug them into here. Now just a quick mention about the master volume. You could, if you wanted to, leave this out. So let's say I grab this so that it's not attached and we'll go to the output left, and grab this so it's not attached and we'll go to the output right. So now there's no master volume and this is going to be very loud. There is in the source settings here, an option here, so you can see volume. I can set this here to 0.5, and that's one way of doing it. I think it's perfectly fine doing it like this. This was just out of habit, so I think you can do it just like this, and you can reference that anywhere in Unreal Engine. Doing it like this, the way I have here, is purely out of habit. I was just so used to creating graph inputs that I created one. The next thing you need to do is actually create the checkpoints. So the sort of checkpoint that I have is a blueprint actor, and inside of the blueprint actor is a box collision, which we're going to go into now. So if I go and find my blueprint checkpoints, here it is. You can see it's an actor. So just in case you've never created one of these, it's very simple. You simply right click, go blueprints, and then you can click actor. Once you've done this, it'll create the blueprints, name it appropriately. And when you open that up, I'm just going to dock it up here. When you open it up, this is what it's going to look like. With your blueprint actor open, the first thing you're going to want to do is create a box collision like I have here. Now what I've done is I go up here, press add. If you type in box collision, you can see here you can add this and it will add to your components here. Then once you've done that, you'll need to resize it appropriately for your scene so that your player triggers it the way that you will want it to be triggered. With your box collision sized correctly, what you want to do is come down here, make sure that it is highlighted. Now that it's highlighted, you can scroll down and you want to look for on component begin overlap. This is in the events section. When you click this, it's going to take you to the event graph and it's going to create an on component begin overlap, and you'll see it's named box collision, which is what this little component is called inside of the component section. Now when you're using a box collision, you do need to say what you're interested in overlapping. So you might say, when something overlaps this, I want X to happen, but you need to say what it is that will be overlapping with the box, because you don't want just anything triggering an event. In this instance, we want the vehicle to trigger an event. So what we need to do is we need to say, we drag off this and we go get this cast to wheeled vehicle pawn. This will depend on what you're doing. In my case, it's a car game, so I'm saying wheeled vehicle pawn. In your case, it could be character. So you could say cast to character or something like that. So it depends on what you're doing. Then once you've got that, you then need to reference this object, which is this other actor area here. So you can see we've connected the other actor into the object. And this is basically saying when a wheeled vehicle pawn overlaps with this box collision, we want something to happen. Coming over here, we have some functionality that is specific to my checkpoints. It's simply adding time on to give the player enough time to get round the circuit and get to the finishing line. Now your checkpoint might be completely different. This is not what we're here for today. We're not here to get into certain functionalities of the blueprints. We're just here to make this blueprint trigger sound. So right now, all we're going to do, I'm going to actually disconnect this over here just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to bring this over here. And then if I hold Control and click, I can drag this and pop it over here. So what we're essentially saying is when the wheeled vehicle pawn collides with the box, which is referring to this, or it's referring to this here, if you can see that little dark line there. So when the wheeled vehicle pawn collides with the box, we're saying we want to play sound 2D. Okay, so wheeled vehicle pawn collides with box, play sound 2D. What a play sound 2D node is, it's essentially a node which allows you to play a sound and there's no location or attenuation settings. So in the game world, as you rotate your character, let's say there's like a campfire and you want to hear the fire and it's crackling. That is not a 2D sound. As you rotate, you would hear the fire appear on your left or on your right or in front of you. with a 2D sound, it doesn't matter what you do with your character or your car, the 2D sound is always going to appear in the center of the stereo image, or if it's a stereo sound, it will appear exactly as that stereo sound was mixed, if that makes sense. So that's what a 2D sound is. What you can do with the Play 2D sound is you can click on here, go to this drop down menu, and you can go find the Metasound that you've just created. So in this case, we have loaded up ms_sfx_checkpoint, which is this Metasound that we just created. So if I play that, there's the Metasound we just created. And what we're doing is we're basically saying that we want that sound to play. So Play Sound 2D is saying, I want this sound, this Metasound to play. Now, one thing I do want to do before we pack this episode up is I want to show anyone who's particularly new to Unreal Engine how to essentially check that everything is working correctly. More than simply just going and playing the game and making sure it's working correctly. So first thing you should do is you should actually have your blueprint now dragged into your world. So if I press Control and the spacebar, bring up my little content drawer here, and I'll go ahead and grab my checkpoints. It's over here. So you need to go and grab that blueprint. I'm going to drag this into the world. So there it is. You should already... Sorry, I'm just getting a bit of glitch in there. You should already have this dragged into the world, have it orientated the way that you want it to be. I've already got mine in, so I'm going to delete that. Now that your blueprint is in your game world and you're ready to test it, we're going to hook a few things up just for testing purposes. Once we found out it's all working, that's all good, we can remove it. So out of this cast to wheeled vehicle, I want to drag off here and I want to get something called a print string. In this print string, you can type some words in here. So I'm going to say, success. So what we're saying is we're saying the cast to wheeled vehicle was successful. And what that is going to do is that's going to pop up in the top left of the screen and it'll say the word success. That means that essentially we have an execution running out of here as we want. What we can do is we can go cast failed and I can get print string again and we can say failed, which we hope it doesn't. Now out of our Play 2D sound we can do another print string. And now we can say 2D sound play. Now if this is all working correctly, what should happen is we should get the words success in the top left of the screen. We should hear our sound, our meta sound, and we should see the words 2D sound play in the top left of the screen. So let's go and try that out now. If I press play. And as we cross the checkpoints, you can see we get the sound and then the top left of the screen, we get those words that we needed to see. So I'll go through it again. You can see in the top left, 2D sound play and the word success. So that's exactly what we want. Okay guys, that is everything working correctly as intended. In the next episode, I'm actually going to go over and show you what I used, the actual sound design techniques I used to create the audio for the car engine. So until then, thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you next time.